Hello, everyone. Welcome to Voices of the Vessel. I'm Shelby, the Director of Marketing for the BADGER, the Lake Michigan Carferry. This podcast is dedicated to highlighting the people and voices from over the years who have made the BADGER what she is today, as she is celebrating 70 years of service. This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Pier Ludington and Visit Manitowoc, our wonderful port cities. Well, thank you all for joining us today. I am very excited to include on today's show Thom Hawley, who, I have to give a lot of credit and thanks to him for kind of creating the public relations marketing department here at Lake Michigan Carferry when it began in 1992, and some of that framework that he helped build. I still personally use today, but he really hit the ground running when the company became what she is today. And so, Thom, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby. It's wonderful to be with you again.
Of course. And it's just very full circle that I just think it's a really cool thing to include you, but what an honor to have you join us. And so what was, your exact job title and role here at Lake Michigan Carferry?
I joined the company in December of 1991. There were very few of us at the time, but Charles Conrad had identified some people in the community he thought that could pull this idea he had, this crazy idea of bringing the SS Badger back to life. So I was hired by Don Klingon and Charles to help with the marketing and public relations. Don was kind of heading up a lot of that. And Jim Anderson was also in the company at the time, and Jim was focused on the ship itself. And so it was an exciting time. There was no template, there was no framework for what we were doing, because as Charles said, we have to redefine what this ship is going to do. It was designed to be a railroad car ferry and served that function for many years, but Lake Michigan Carferry was going to transform it. It was a transformative change to passenger service. And so part of the whole marketing and redevelopment of the ship was to what should a passenger ship look like? What do we do with that? And from the marketing and public relations standpoint, which Don and I were working on, was to get the word out about it, because it was very important. We didn't have a lot of time to market the new operation, but we knew we'd have one great public relations opportunity when the ship came back to life and went to sail on that first day. And we also had to put the car ferry in context with its past and what its future was going to look like. So it was a very exciting time. I have to say that of the career that I had, this was probably one of my favorites, if not the one that I had the most fun with, because of the variety that was provided. And I'm sure you experience that every day. There's not one day that was alike. They're all different. And each day presented new challenges and new opportunities for our company, especially in those early years. But I have to give a lot of credit to the people that were there initially, the folks that said yes to Charles, like Don and Jim, who really helped get these things going.
Oh, definitely. And I think you said it perfectly. And there's a transformative time of going from a rail car ferry to a passenger ferry. And you are so right. Every day is something different and fun and unique challenges that I just think it's such a cool story. But especially I can really honor that you noticed that there was this massive history that she had in this bright future ahead of her. And even in 92, what an exciting time. But here we are in 2023, and it's still bright and bold and beautiful as ever. And I think, there's been a lot of good people along the way that have helped create that. And so thank you for your contributions to that.
Thank you. And I think that historical context is always important, because in order to have what we have today, we have to think about all the people who made it possible. And I even think about Michigan-Wisconsin Transportation, which was the predecessor to Lake Michigan Carferry. There was Glenn Bowden and George Towns who stepped up and said, well, we're going to try to keep this boat going, even though there was dwindling rail traffic going across the lake at that time. But the chassis system said, well, we'll try to put some cars your way. And they made a valiant effort as well. And I have to say, if they hadn't stepped up, as Charles stepped up, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So it's been a community that embraces its ship. It owns the ship and wants to make sure that it continues operating for many years to come. And so all of those people deserve a lot of credit.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree with you that the community ties are so amazing. Even when you look locally in Ludington and locally in Manitowoc and beyond, that community really, I feel, is a lot of that underlying theme, if you will, of the spirit of the Badger. And talking about community, you are local to Ludington, which I think is really cool that you got to grow so much of your career here. Kind of like myself being a local here, that what was your first experience with the Carferries?
Well, my first experience was at a very young age. If you think about the ship and the impact it's had on the community, it's impacted generations of people here. It was a huge employer when there were 7 ships operating. And the first real memory I have of it was, of course, visiting the docks. We'd all ride our bikes down there and watch the boats come and go. I also remember hopping in the car with my grandfather on several occasions, and he'd load up all the grandkids. And he loved the railroad. I mean, he was a real railroader. Whenever he traveled, he wanted to go by rail. So, of course, the car ferries as rail train ferries was fascinating to him. So he'd take the grandkids down. We'd all sit in the car and watch these ships load and unload.
How fun.
And
what
it was
great
really
memory.
fun. But one of the first crossings I had was when my brother Bob was working aboard the ship. He was a college student, and he was a waiter in the dining rooms. Now, of course, back then it was white coat service, and railroads were known for quality service and quality food and a lot of amenities. So the ship was built with lots of amenities because passengers were part of it, but its main purpose was a train ferry. Anyway, my brother Dave and I got aboard, and we took a trip to Milwaukee. And it was on the Badger. And it was, of course, that was a long day. That's 6 hours each way, and then probably 2 hours in port. It was in the summer when it was busy. Of course, a lot of people were traveling then. But Dave and I had a stateroom. My brother arranged that, and that was our base. And I felt like I was the captain of the ship when I was on that boat. In fact, cool. I had thought about it. I remember back in grade school, somebody asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, I want to be a ship's captain, and I want to be a car ferry captain because I'll just look like a great job. Well, I never quite got there to that level, but I did get to work with several captains aboard the ship and was up in the pilot house many times. So I felt like I was a captain at times when I was working there as well.
Well, you kind of got to be a captain in your own right. And, you may not have physically driven the ship, or you may have, I don't know, but getting to be a part of the operation and helping get her out, on her way and rebuilding the ship in a way that you got to do it in your own way. How fun.
Right. I have to say, I did drive the ship on several occasions. The
cool.
wheelsman would step aside and he'd show me how to do it. And it's funny how when you go up there to do that, have that experience, you begin to feel the size of the ship, and you begin to understand how it moves through the water and what you have to do to the wheel in order to get it to go on a straight line. Now, I can't guarantee my line across the lake was very straight, but I sure had a good time doing it.
I'm sure you did a great job. So what was it like to see the Badger sailing again after, all of the change throughout her history, and then getting to be a part of the crew in 1992? I can just imagine. I know myself, every year, that first sailing, such a special day, but really to see this new opportunity sail.
Well, I'm going to age myself a little bit. I was around when MWT ended its service in 1990. And I remember that night very well because I could hear the ship blowing its whistle And I said to myself, well, we're not going to hear that again. This is the end of Carferries in Ludington.
Wow.
And
yeah, that is a very pivotal moment.
It was a key moment. The purpose of the ship history had taken that away. Transportation, moving rail had changed all of that. So when Charles came along and said he wanted to create a new car ferry service, passenger service, that was a very exciting day. I didn't really know that I would ever be a part of it until I was asked to become a part and invited to interview. So it was a very exciting time from that transformation to know that, again, another person had stepped up, willing to invest his own money in it and to create this new kind of car ferry service.
Yeah, how awesome. And especially, and you talk about MWT and all these people that we're so thankful that they stepped up when they did and that we can have this conversation today.
Exactly.
And so can you talk a little bit more about the undertaking of refurbishing? Because, when it was a railroad ferry, the passenger area, that was kind of secondary in a way. And you talk about the white linen dining service and all that, to where now we have way more passenger amenities. Like, what was it like being a part of that refurbishing process?
Well, the car ferries, of course, were built in the 1950s, and the Spartan and the Badger had the most extensive passenger accommodations of any of the prior ships sailing in Ludington. And so passenger service became a priority for those ships. And while there were a lot of amenities already aboard the ship, LMC decided that it needed to change up the interiors. The interiors had grown tired, of course, over time, and all needed to be refurbished. So Jim Anderson led the charge, and I believe Carol Thompson kind of helped get the engine crew going. One of the greatest challenges, before you talk about the ship itself, was finding crew members.
Oh, for sure.
Back in 1990, a lot of the crew members, some of them were still in the community, but a lot of them had left and gone on or finished their career somewhere else. So a lot of people had to come back because we had to find a crew that understands steam technology.
Yeah, definitely.
So finding a crew was one of the great challenges. But fortunately, Skip McCumber, who was part of the operation, knew a lot of the crew members, and she was part of MWT days. And so we were slowly started to call people back to do the work that needed to be done. But of course, on the interior of the ship, the owners and management had decided what we needed to do. And of course, everything aboard the ship is steel. So in order to do that, some of the inside staterooms were taken out, which included a movie room, a game room, and a museum. And those were amenities. So the museum was a project which I was affiliated with, wanted again to talk about the context of the car ferries, about what it was and what it had become. And of course, all of the food and areas had to be refurbished and updated. And of course, we added things like Badger Bingo.
Yes.
The famous Badger Bingo.
Yes, world famous Badger Bingo.
Right. So we had entertainers aboard the ship and really a customer service crew. I remember some of the first ones that were there. And again, we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants, but everybody came together to make that happen. And it really was super exciting to be a part of that. So that's how we transformed a ship, a car ferry, to become a passenger vessel with amenities that we thought passengers would enjoy. It's a 4-hour crossing, and you need to fill the time, but you also need to create opportunities to generate revenue to cover some of the costs. So food and a gift shop and those kind of things were added as well.
How cool. And especially every year we have so many people who come back and say that they cannot wait to play more games of Badger Bingo. And it's always fun to see, especially grandparents or parents with young children in the museum and getting to learn together about the ships. That I think it's what a cool story too, of like you take this 1950s ship and convert it to more modern day, and getting to use those staterooms and converting them, that I would have loved to experience it, but I've been told that those interior staterooms included showers in them.
That's correct. Yeah.
And I'm sure that would have been neat. That it works out now with our staterooms that we have, but what a cool opportunity to take something and see the visioning for what the future could be, because I know a lot of people enjoy all of those amenities, but especially Badger Bingo. And when we look at your career that you had some really awesome, notable moments that I hope I get to have stories like you do someday, that I do have a lot of fun and get to do some really unique things. But I think you have some really cool stories to share there about some fun highlights from your career.
Yeah, I had quite a few. I worked in both Wisconsin and Michigan, so I had the opportunity to gain many new friendships on both sides of our lake. Probably one of the most notable was when we took the ship to Chicago. I believe that was 1995. We were 3 years into the season. And I was having a conversation with some folks in Grand Rapids, the West Michigan Tourist Association. And at one point they said, well, could we take the ship to Chicago? And I said, well, I don't know if that's possible. They were a marketing organization. And of course, Chicago, the greater Chicago area is a huge market for many passengers.
Oh, it still is. Yes.
Yeah. And so the concept was to take the Badger, create a trade show aboard the ship on the car deck, and we called it the Michigan Vacation Showboat, and took it to Navy Pier in Chicago. And what an exciting trip that was. Now, this was the early days of Navy Pier. It was
how exciting. The big ship in the big city.
Yeah, exactly. Navy Pier was being redeveloped by the city of Chicago. So we, of course, had to seek permission from the mayor's office and other entities in Chicago to even bring the ship in. And it was a huge undertaking, a lot of different people. I remember Stafford Smith, who owns the Bayview Inn up in Petoskey Harbor Springs, provided his staff and the food for the crossing. And of course, we had a lot of our marketing partners with us. The whole car deck, I think we probably had at least 50 or 60 vendors on the car.
How awesome.
To showcase Michigan, and especially West Michigan, as a destination. We had a number of television interviews lined up. I remember doing an interview with WGN in Chicago.
Oh, cool.
And, our passengers were allowed to disembark. In a lot of cases, they were on their own while the ship was there, and a lot of them got hotels and got to experience Chicago for a few days. We promoted West Michigan. That trip was so memorable. The weather was perfect.
Oh, good.
We had a fun group of people aboard, and even leaving the city, which was kind of bittersweet because we built up to this whole event, and then suddenly it's coming to an end. The sunset that night was incredible. It was smooth. The water's smooth like the ship that's behind you. It was just beautiful. Like a mirror. It was a grand trip and a wonderful experience. And I think probably still has some impact. There's still people that talk about.
Yes, definitely. I get people that ask me about it all the time, and
right.
And people ask me if we could do it again, and I don't know today we could, but how cool that you got to be a part of putting it all together. And I know you shared some pictures with me that I'll definitely have to get onto our podcast site of how cool it is to see the big ship in the big city, where you go to Chicago and you see all these big buildings and it just kind of fits in when the Badger's here in Ludington, like it stands out, where in Chicago, it kind of looks like, just another ship in a way.
Yeah. In context, in Ludington, the ship, when you go down, you're like, wow, that's a big ship. But you put it in context of Chicago and the skyline of Chicago, you said, whoa, it's not so big in Chicago. But we tried to make it a big thing while we were there. And I have to, again, give credit to Bob Manglitz and Don Klingon and Jim Anderson for believing in doing this. It was a huge undertaking to do it, but they agreed to do it. And so the ship sailed to Chicago. And I think everybody who was aboard that ship will never forget it. I know I won't.
That's so cool. I'm glad you got to experience that. And I know when we've had conversation about some things that you've done, you've also worked with some big name people who have come on board as well.
Yes. There were certain celebrities that came aboard the ship that over the years. We recognized them. And in some cases, we would get them on aboard the ship. Probably the most unusual was Weird Al Yankovic.
Really?
Weird Al, yeah, he crossed on the ship, but we put his entourage on the car deck, and he had a motorhome, but he never got out of the motorhome. Because I think back at that time he was a celebrity, and they were just using the ship to cross the lake as a convenience. But yeah, I got to meet Weird Al on one of the ships, and I got to meet a lot of unusual people while I worked at the Carferry. It was fun.
Yeah, I hope I get to say something as cool as meeting Weird Al Yankovic.
Yeah.
Well, especially, and I know in those times, like, he was a huge, huge name. And I've met some really wonderful people along the way that I'm so thankful for, that maybe someday I'll get to say something along the lines of Weird Al myself.
Right. I also had the opportunity, it was during the election of 2000 when Al Gore was running for president. He was vice president at the time under Bill Clinton. He was running for president. And I got a call from his campaign at one point, and they said, we would like to use the Carferry to get the Al Gore campaign across the lake.
How awesome.
I almost dropped the phone, and I thought maybe it was a prank or something, because no, it was true. And one of the campaign coordinators had said, we're going to make a visit to Ludington and determine its feasibility. And so I kind of sheepishly had to go back to the owners of the Carferry and say, all right, we have this opportunity, and Definitely. It probably will have great public relations impact for the service. And so we went ahead and said yes to the campaign. And then, of course, the campaign had to send in the Secret Service to start scouting to see if we could get the ship across the lake safely with all the security bubble that's required of having a vice president aboard your ship. And so that was they came in a few weeks ahead of time, and we gave up an office at the Carferry so that they have a base of operations. I started to work with some of the various networks that were going to do stand-ups Sunday or morning stand-ups for their morning shows from Ludington. So that was all moving along very well. And suddenly I got a call from the campaign. They said, we're going to have to cancel.
Oh, gosh.
And so I was just crestfallen. We'd done quite a bit of work to get them here.
Oh, I can imagine.
But at that point, Al Gore was behind in the polls. And they had to get him across the lake quickly to Green Bay because, like today, Wisconsin was a swing state. And so they were going to use Air Force Two from Muskegon to Green Bay. But he had come across the state that day, and the plan was to come to Ludington and then take the Carferry across. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. But I had the opportunity to meet Al Gore at the rally sometime after that. And that was all a result of my being part of Lake Michigan Carferry. So when I started this job, I had no idea where it was going to take me. But I guess that's the fun of work. You just never know where you're going to end up. But again, I just have to reiterate, the Carferry provided some really unique opportunities for all of us that had the opportunity to work there.
How cool. And it's like, take care of her and she'll take care of you. But what a great story. It's not every day that you get to say you meet a presidential candidate, let alone the current vice president. That I'm glad you still got to meet him, but how cool would that have been if you could have gotten him on board. That
Right. I have some pictures. It really did happen. And it was a lot of fun, super exciting to be a part of that as well.
How cool. That is so awesome.
And now, a word about our partners in our port cities. If your idea of the perfect vacation is sugar sand beaches, clear blue waters along 28 miles of Lake Michigan shoreline, outdoor adventures, climbing to the top of historic lighthouses, or exploring a charming downtown, Ludington is your destination for pure Michigan fun. Ludington's unspoiled natural resources offer the quintessential up-north experience, all within easy reach, located at the intersection of US 31 and US 10. No matter what you're seeking, a beach or outdoor adventure, a peaceful getaway, or just a community of friendly faces, you can find it all in pure Ludington. As a Ludington native, I know I sound biased, but Ludington is truly an astonishing place. There's always something going on, amazing places to dine and get drinks, along with unique attractions you won't find just anywhere. Plan your visit today at pureludington.com. Manitowoc, the maritime capital of Wisconsin, is the perfect vacation destination for those seeking adventure, a little relaxation, or a whole lot of fun. With sandy beaches, miles of biking and hiking trails, a real World War II submarine that you can both climb aboard and sleep on, a strong art scene, variety of breweries to explore, and array of annual events and festivals, Manitowoc offers so many unique and exciting options for visitors to add to their travel itinerary. As a frequent visitor to Manitowoc, I can attest to the thriving and charming downtown. From classic candy and ice cream parlors to outdoor music venues, there's so much to explore, experience, and enjoy in Manitowoc. I always look forward to going back. Start planning your getaway to Manitowoc, Wisconsin at visitmanitowoc.com.
So when we talk about the history of the Badger and, being a local, did you ever have a favorite car ferry?
Did I ever have a favorite? That's very interesting. I don't know that I really had a favorite. Of course, everybody says the city of Midland because when they built the city of Midland, they kind of broke the mold on the car ferries, but it kind of set the standard for the Spartan and the Badger.
Yeah, definitely.
But I do remember a long trip on the Midland, which was very memorable when we took the ship up to the Manitou Passage. This was during MWT Day.
Yeah.
And we sailed up to the Manitou Passage. The DNR was aboard, and they were going to be planting fish up on northern Lake Michigan. So I had an invitation to go aboard the ship and have, a nice meal and sail up. And then we went over to Kewaunee. So I would have to say the Midland was probably a favorite just because of the nature. It had a lot of some late Art Deco styling to it.
Oh, definitely.
It was the time when car ferries were coming into their own as far as passenger vessels were concerned, and kind of set the standard for what the Spartan and the Badger would be later on. So I think that was probably my favorite.
That's awesome. And I do hear that from a lot of people that my parents, especially my dad, are always quick to remind me of, hey, you only get to see the Badger sail, but we got to experience all of them. And I love hearing stories about the city of Midland that you say it perfectly of how she kind of set the standard for what the Spartan and Badger would become. And what a beautiful ship. I love learning about her history and just all the wooden interior and just how unique and Art Deco definitely was her style. Indeed.
Yes, that ship had a lot of style. Absolutely.
Awesome. And so what is your favorite thing about the Badger?
My favorite thing about the Badger, I was just thinking about that the other day, and I always think about the circumstances of why the Badger continues to sail today, and why the Badger was the ship that Lake Michigan Carferry inherited. And I always say it's 19 inches. Now, a lot of people don't understand that, but when we were talking the other day, we found the documentation when that ship was raised. Yes. The entire superstructure was raised 19 inches to accommodate a larger rail car. and it was intended to be done to the Spartan as well. But I think Art Chavez provided that little bit of research.
Yes,
but I offered aboard the ship, and I said, we owe it to that 19 inches that you see around here, because that's what kept the Badger going. That's what kept the certificate current. That's what kept rail traffic going across the lake, so they wouldn't have to divide up rail cars. So I think from that historical standpoint, which I always approach, I kind of approach things that way. I like the little odd stories, was that 19 inches, because if they hadn't done that, the Badger may have seen the same fate as the Spartan.
Oh, for sure. And I always like to, kind of jokingly, lovingly say that they're fraternal twins because of that. And, and you see the Spartan docked there, and you wouldn't exactly know it just from the angle of looking at her, that what a difference those inches make. And I love the research part of it, of when I learned more about it. I don't know why, but I thought it was more so at the top, where I thought it was so impressive to learn that those inches were added right at the car deck level. Right. And that actually happened at Manitowoc Shipbuilding, right in Manitowoc. And even though she was built at the Christie Corporation, so what a neat tie to that community. And I can't remember the exact number of men that it took. I want to say like 150 men or so, all at the same time with a hydraulic jack. It took like a week to cut it, and then like 3 hours to raise it. When you talk about just the impact that these ships had on the community, and that, having her out of service, you were essentially losing money. And what a cool teamwork kind of story, and how, it's still paying off today.
Yeah, and I suspect it was that 19 inches that allowed Lake Michigan Carferry, which I was part of, the first that allowed the car deck, or an extra layer of cars, to be put in.
Yes.
Because if we hadn't had that 19 inches, that probably would have been a difficult thing to do. So we owe a lot to that 19 inches over the years. But my favorite memories of the Badger are always the crew. The ship is the material thing. It's the people that bring the ship to life. And I can think about a lot of the people who I had contact with there over the years who really brought the ship to life. I know we all like to go down and watch it when that first puff of smoke comes out
yes.
in the spring, because we know the ship's going to come back to life. But from that smoke are the people that are down in the engine room that are lighting the fires for a season. And they'll work. Those fires won't go out for an entire season. That fire continues, and it takes people to do that. So I have to give credit to all the people who have worked aboard that ship, but especially those that I had the opportunity to work with. There were some memorable characters there, but they loved the ship. It was their home. And as such, we respected that. And some were on for an entire season.
Definitely.
But there was good time. And whenever I boarded, I always enjoyed the meals that I shared with the crew members aboard the ship, because that was a great opportunity for me to get them to know personally. So that's probably one of my best memories of the Badger.
So well said. And I would definitely have to agree with you that I feel like, not to get too philosophical, that the Badger has this spirit about her that kind of brings out the best of people. But I still today would say one of my favorite parts of my job is the people. And I get to meet some amazing people, but I get to work with some amazing people too. And I just feel that the spirit of the Badger brings out that community, but also that teamwork and camaraderie, that we're all here to provide that great passenger service. We're also here to take care of this ship, because she's taken care of her crew over the years, and our crew is so dedicated to keeping her going. And that's part of the reason why we're talking about 70 years right now, but it's also these people dedicate so much that they make it so easy to be here and work with them, that I would have to completely agree with you on that.
A crew is a family for a season, and it takes special people to do that and make that commitment. When the boat separates from the apron, you're out on the water. Then you have the responsibility of caring for the passengers, and so there's a lot that goes into making that ship run every day. And I always say that, and I said it to some of the employees when I was there, and I say it in my business today. No one job is more important than another. They're all important because it takes that team, a group of people, to operate that ship. And if one team member isn't there, oftentimes it could be that the ship couldn't sail for a variety of reasons. So hats off to all those people that do that kind of work in any maritime industry.
Of course. And thank you for being a part of that and just help building some of that teamwork as well, because especially over the years, when we look back, there's so many people who say this was the best job they had, or they refer their own family members because it is such a family atmosphere. And I think, it's a good tie into the next question of and we talked a little bit about, the impact of the communities, but what more would you say about, the impact of the car ferries on the communities and how, it's really bridged a lot over the years?
Well, if you think about the car ferry today, I would like to calculate how many people have sailed aboard that ship since it first. I mean, and the effect that it has on people today has been having that effect on people since 1953 when it started. So you have generations of people who have been aboard the ship. So while they may not have stayed in Ludington, they may have passed through Ludington, they know about Ludington. It was probably from having that experience that brought them to Ludington, and I'm sure it brought a lot of people back. I think Manitowoc can say the same.
Definitely, yeah.
Once you get into community, experience it. If you came before, you're sailing and ate in a restaurant or stayed in a motel or whatever, it gave you a chance to explore the community as well. So from that standpoint, there's just this whole ecosystem of tourism that surrounds the ship, and that is a major industry in our community. Not to mention, or also to mention, the number of jobs it created, and all of the support businesses that had to support the groceries, for the food and everything else, linens. There were lots of spin-off businesses in Ludington that supported the car ferry as well. So it's had a huge impact and still has a huge impact on the community today.
Yeah, it's just amazing to think of all those people that we don't have to go far to find someone, or family members or friends who've worked here or had some type of unique job. And especially, I feel like me personally, I'm sure you could attest to this, that being in that marketing public relations realm of kind of being the gatekeeper of those stories. But it's amazing to hear how many different stories and lives that she's touched. And even down from, a captain to a deckhand to someone in the engine room, someone in customer service, that there really is something for everyone here, and amazing stories to prove it.
Yes, there are a lot of different kinds of careers that can be built around that ship. And you have to think very broadly about that, too, because there are so many different kinds of jobs aboard the ship and on the shore as well.
Oh, yes, for sure.
Every job there is important to the operation of that ship.
And teamwork is definitely something that we pride ourselves on, but it's something that our crew is so eager to be in that team setting, too, I think.
And it's interesting to see a younger generation coming along, too. I think I met a wheelsman in your office the other day who's relatively young, but starting and building a career here aboard the Badger. And that's exciting, too, to know that there'll be another group of people, younger people, that will take over this operation and continue to operate it for hopefully many years to come. Charles's goal was for 100 years. So we're at year 70.
Yes.
on the age of the ship. So we got a little ways to go for another 100 years of the Badger, but hopefully it'll still be around.
Well, and I think that and especially when you look at the generations, I want to say the generations before us made it very easy for the next generation to get involved, and just really appreciate your piece of that visioning as well, and being a part of keeping our legacy alive. So, in speaking of that, it is so humbling and amazing to think of 70 years of service here in 2023. How does it feel to be a part of that legacy?
Oh, I'm just extremely proud that I had the opportunity to spend 10 years there, and for the memories that it gave me, and to know that I was a part of keeping something going, that I could be a part of helping Charles Conrad realize his dream, although he didn't get to be with us for very long after the car ferry service got underway. I'm grateful that he got to see his vision fully implemented, and that it continues today. So I'm proud of what we did there, and was glad that we could hand the baton off, so to speak, on a relay race to another generation of people and another company at this point to keep this great tradition in our community alive.
For sure. And she definitely has a bright future ahead of her that I know I'm so excited to take a moment here at 70 and pause and look at what we've done. And it's so humbling to think of what the next 70 years could be.
Well, the sky's the limit. If you have a marketing imagination, as I know you do, there'll be lots of new opportunities and new things. And of course, as in any business, you have to respond. There's incremental change, and then there's transformational change.
Yes.
And so I know that there are probably going to be some transformative changes coming to the ship in the future to keep it going. And so we need to embrace those things as they come. And of course, as passenger, the way passengers travel changes, we'll have to evolve with it as well. So
definitely. And
that's all part of being part of a dynamic company.
Exactly. And I mean, you said it perfectly of, the Badger has stood the test of time, that she has that spirit about her, that she'll continue to keep on that path and transform as she goes along.
She's kind of timeless if you think about it.
Right.
Even though it's coal-fired steam technology, it's still going, and it still is an efficient way to get the ship across the lake. So it's fun when you think about it.
Well, and it's just really cool of how often in today's day and age that you can step onto a ship and feel like you're stepping back into the 1950s, but in such a modern way. That timeless is definitely a good word for the Badger, I would say.
And it has the lineage or the resume, let's say, to go with it. It's both ports have been recognized for their historic contributions to car ferry service. You can see the historic markers. I was one of my projects while I worked there was to have historic designations on both sides of the lake, and then it's a mechanical engineering landmark. All of those things recognize the importance of this ship to the maritime industry and to the communities it serves.
Yeah, she definitely has that storied history of awards and designations, and especially when you talk about the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, that she was awarded that in 1996. And right. Here we are almost 30 years later, still touting that same system and engine. That I think that's impressive. And, right. And especially in 2016, when she became a National Historic Landmark, and then here in 2022, she became a designated part of the Marine Highway system. And so she really does have that timeless feature to, really always make us say, okay, what's next? What's she going to accomplish next?
Who knows? Who knows what's next?
Exactly. That, Thom, I so appreciate your time and, having just kind of this full circle moment of thank you for all you've done over the years and for your part of the Badger, that she definitely has a bright future ahead of her, in part to thanks to you. So thank you again.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Shelby.